Trump is just about to become president. What's his popularity like now amongst the American public?
So his popularity is actually at peak Trump. We are at peak Trump. His ratings have gone up. We've got 48% of the Americans say that they approve of his job as president-elect. That is less people saying that they're negative about him than there really has been for quite some time. And we asked people how they feel about the inauguration, and the main word that the American public said was excited. So there is this feeling in the country, unlike what we saw in 2016, 2017, when President Trump was inaugurated that first time. There is a sense of excitement. There is a little tiny sense of some of those critics from before actually coming around onto Team Trump in a way we haven't seen. Will this last once we're into the policy weeds and the ups and downs of the administration? Probably not. But actually, on the issue of Trump, I think we're at the least polarised American society's been for quite some time.
And what are the main issues that Americans are thinking about in the first 100 days?
So the big priority of the American public at the moment, at least in terms of Trump, is immigration. President Trump's, during that campaign, talks about deportations of illegal immigrants, and that is something that the American public, and particularly people who voted for Trump or got him over the line in those key swing states, are really, really keen to see. So that immigration issue is absolutely key. Economy and inflation are also huge concerns. Another reason that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris were so underwater in their approval ratings by the time of the election. That's also something that people want to see change on. The way that the Trump administration think they have an answer to that is obviously through things like fair trade, tariffs, and also tax cuts and lifting things like oil and gas drilling. So that's going to be a big priority too. What the American public really want is just somebody to get things done, and that's one of the reasons that Trump won the election over Kamala Harris, and they're excited to see that happen in a range of different policy areas.
How important is the issue of mass deportations?
So mass deportations and immigration is a really big issue. Illegal immigration is up there in the top 3 issues. So in the election, we asked people afterwards why they voted the way they did. And it was the economy, immigration, and actually the strength of each candidate. So economy and immigration, absolutely vital. The pressure on the southern border has actually gone down in terms of numbers compared to where it was 12 months ago, but people are still seeing the impact in their everyday communities of that huge influx. To put it into context, we talk about small boat crossings in the UK. This is many, many times that amount in terms of who actually comes over the southern border illegally. So it's had a huge impact on immigration figures overall in a way that our illegal immigration figures in the UK don't really do so. So absolutely huge issue. It is also going to be a really big political issue because once it happens, there's a lot of sensitivities over exactly how it happens. Will they, as some are saying, go into some big blue cities, Democrat voting cities like New York and Chicago in the next few days, the first few days of the administration, to try and do big deportation sort of moments? And what reaction will that prompt from the media and from critics on the left? So this is going to be a big live issue, almost regardless of exactly how it turns out.
And why is Trump so popular right now?
Well, I think there's a bit of a sense of people have become inured to the things that they didn't like about Trump in 2016, 2020. I think that the sense of drama that unfolded with Trump, people have just become a bit more used to. I think they are used to those sort of shoot by the hips comments that maybe might be offensive or might not quite work out in some way. They're more inured to those things. They've seen Trump, they know that side of Trump, and they're actually more focused on the substance. I think Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, they end in very negative terms. We ran a poll that was out a few weeks ago showing that Joe Biden is seen as the worst president of modern history by voters today. Now, there's always a bit of recency bias there, but clearly he's not going out well either. So I think voters, yes, they're still tribal. But I think they are saying, let's at least give them a chance. And I think they're open to seeing what that second Trump administration looks like. Feels very, very different from 2016. That 2016 election, if you remember, took a lot of people by surprise. Now, actually, if you watch the mainstream media, you think it was exactly the same reaction. You had the classic, the NBCs and the CNN sort of heads in hand saying, how has this happened again? Actually, and I live in quite liberal New York, the reaction the next day afterwards, you wouldn't have known an election had taken place. Most people were just going about their everyday business. In 2016, friends tell me that felt very, very different. Protests and sort of people walking around with anguish sketched on their face. I think we're in a more pragmatic era, and I think people are quite keen to at least give Trump a bit of a time to try and prove that he can do the job.
Do you think there's been a cultural shift to the right in America away from issues like DEI and so on? We've seen that in big American corporations, the FBI and things like that. But in public opinion, has there been a cultural shift to the right?
Oh, I think there has. I think that some of the more liberal side of things, like for example DEI, and we saw that in terms of university admissions, the Supreme Court ruling saying that actually you couldn't have affirmative action in giving people benefits in terms of race, in terms of an advantage in getting into university. We've also seen that happen in just general hiring practices and sort of how people go about their everyday lives. If you think back to where American culture was in 2020 after the George Floyd's murder and those Black Lives Matter protests, I think we've seen a big shift. I think people are a lot less concerned about speaking their mind on some of these issues, and I think that the DEI sort of what people see is they think it's overreached. They think it's gone too far. Again, I did a poll a couple of weeks ago saying, do you feel like all these different things, political correctness, DEI, some other issues have gone too far, about right, or not gone far enough in American society? And the majority say gone too far. So I think there has been a cultural shift. I think that's also been pushed by social media. I think that's also been pushed by, we're seeing a much more gender split between young people. So young men much more likely to think like that than young women. And I think this is something that is coming more to the fore. And I think you see that in terms of businesses now ditching lots of DEI policies. They're not just doing that because they want to curry favor with Trump. They're doing it because their customers, their employees, their publics are saying, just get on with the job. I don't want to hear about all this.
And what about the Democrats? Are they popular? Are they unpopular? I know Kamala Harris obviously lost the election. Where are they standing at the moment?
So look, the Democrats are always going to have 45% or so of the public behind them. Clearly, Kamala Harris lost the election, but this is a nation that is quite divided on political terms. So the Democrats always come from a strong start, even if they've just lost. But people do feel that they're out of touch on these key issues. They don't feel they had an answer on immigration. They don't feel they had an answer on the economy. They were particularly frustrated that Kamala Harris said when she was questioned on, I think it was The View, what would you do differently from the Biden administration? And she said, I can't name a single thing. That creates that sense of them perhaps weren't waking up to some of those changes that we've seen in society on things like culture, on things like immigration. So I think that is something that people are getting more frustrated by. And I think they're looking at the Democrats and saying, well, we can't really see what their answer is on this.
How can the Republicans solidify this sort of momentum? How can they keep up the momentum in the first 100 days, in the first year, and so on?
So I think the challenge facing the Republicans now is that Trump does not equal Republican, and Republican does not equal Trump. What do I mean by that? Well, Trump brought in a lot of voters who actually didn't vote even in that same election for some Republican candidates further down the ballot. He brought in people who were more working class, white working class, less likely to have a college degree. He brought those people in 2016, but he also maintained that and actually deepen that enthusiasm in 2024. He also brought in something that was completely new in this election, which was non-white voters, particularly non-white men, Hispanic and black. He brought in more of those than before. Now, they still vote heavily Democrat, but he was able to drive into those racial groups, and actually he performed best amongst non-whites than a Republican candidate has done since the 1960s, 1970s. So keeping that coalition is tough, and the Republicans are going to have to try and think about how do they start to do that without Trump as well as with him. And I think they're going to have to find those things that people liked about Trump, that sense of strength, sense of authenticity, that sense of being in touch on those key issues. And I think crucially, it's a simple but key point. They're going to have to deliver. They're going to have to show those results, whether it's in the first 100 days, whether it's by the end of that term. They're going to have to show that they get it. It helps them a lot, I think, having a vice president who is also very popular in J.D. Vance and also represents that wing of the Trump side of the party. We did a poll asking Republican voters who would they most likely to be the nominee in 2028. I know that's a long way away, big pinch of salt, but J.D. Vance is by far and above, by as much as 50 points above the rest of his opponents. So him being in that prime position, I think, does give the Republican Party some hope for the future too.
I know that you said Trump is at peak. We're at peak Trump here in America. But what about in Britain? What do British people think about Trump? Has that changed?
Well, we asked people back at the election in Britain how they would vote, and it was 75% for Harris, 25% for Trump. So not quite the same over in Britain. There is still that feeling, I'm not sure exactly what it is, but there is still that feeling in Britain that perhaps Trump can be a little bit aggressive, a little bit rude. They don't quite like him in the same way that they do here. He has broadened that out, certainly in Britain from 2016, 2020. But even if they don't like Trump the man, I think some of those values and attributes that Trump has, strength, authenticity, gets things done, you might not agree with me on everything, but I'll do it. those are qualities that A, voters really like, and they want to see more of in their British politicians, and B, they are things that actually make people go out and vote for politicians. So I think that that's a gap in the market in the UK that is waiting to be filled. They might not like Trump himself, but that sense of how Trump got here, that's going to be important in the UK in the years to come.
Okay, thank you.